I'm sure that there's something on the screen that says that we're ready to do this.
We're live.
Oh, there. It says it's live. Okay. Today we're going to talk about soil tests. And I know this is going to sound crazy and gut-wrenching and stuff like that, but I'm going to talk about not doing soil tests. I'm going to talk about how to well, maybe go so far as to never do a soil test, and why, and what to do instead. I've got a lot to say down this road, and I know at the very beginning it's going to just sound crazy and weird for a gardener. And but I like to think that at the end of all of this, we'll have made things about 100 times easier for every gardener. And I'm hoping that Alan Booker is going to pop in here any minute now, but I was going to get this guy Rick Valley to be here today, and he's the guy that originally that I met him 20 years ago. And when I met him, I was already cutting way back on my soil tests, but he went even further. And I'll get to that in a moment. And I really wanted him to be here, but we couldn't get it worked out. But I've got, so until Alan gets here, I have done a lot of soil tests. And I think I have 3 different ways to measure pH that I do myself. And on top of that, there's all kinds of study to be done about weeds that are growing and what they indicate about your soil. And I kind of feel like those are things that the two of you. So like, first, let me do, I've got a pretty good idea what Samantha knows, but Clay, when it comes to soil tests and gardening and the relationship between soil tests and gardening, how much experience, like what's your knowledge set in that space?
I have not done very many soil tests at all. I'm more of a holistic approach on that, and I'm looking rather than individual nutrients or anything like that. I'm kind of looking at a whole picture when I'm doing my own gardening stuff.
Okay, so when you said not much at all, is it fair to say that you have done 0 soil tests? Is that true? Okay, that is true. All right. And now Samantha, I believe you've also never done a soil test. Is that true? You're muted. You got to unmute.
I've never sent one in, but I have done the jar test in quite a few different places.
Okay.
So it's not a laboratory test.
Right. The jar test is good to be able to see like how much clay and sand and silt am I working with, and you can also get an idea of organic matter, but it's not exactly a great organic matter test. But all that shit floating at the top, that's your organic matter.
Yeah.
But okay, but I'm talking about laboratory testing. So, you'll go out and you'll scrape off the top couple of inches, and then you'll get a spoon and dig out like a few tablespoons worth and put it into a little Ziploc bag and then mail it to a laboratory that'll then send you back these paper reports. But that's the kind of soil test I'm talking about right now. All right. So basically this is an essay that I wrote apparently 4 months ago, and it had to do with, I can't remember what was going on, but stuff was going on. I'm trying to talk to somebody, and it seems like a lot of times I write this kind of stuff, it's when in 1 week, 4 different people will bring up the exact same thing. And it's like, surely I've written this down somewhere before, and it turned out I hadn't. So I wrote this because I just needed to say the thing. And so today we're going to try and mash it into this video format. Ooh, and I've got the ability to, I'm clicking on a thing. Oh, good. Look, there's people. Yes, we're talking to people. Delightful. So I'm gonna basically read off chunks of this, and I'm hoping that we can talk about it a bit. Many years ago, I tested my soil pH a lot and got my soils lab tested a lot, and was overly focused on dialing in the correct soil amendments. I did have great success, but it was a crazy huge amount of work. And I got to say, it wasn't exactly soul building work. Going out, scraping off whatever's on the top, digging out a little sample to put into a Ziploc bag, putting it into some kind of package, and getting it addressed and getting it mailed to where it needs to go, and then getting the report to come back. I mean, you had to like fill out a paperwork with every soil sample, and I don't know. It just, and if what you want to do is polyculture, one of the questions that they ask is like, in order for us to give you advice, you have to tell us what crop are you trying to grow. And so the advice that they'll give will be like, okay, well, here's, for example, your NPK and calcium that you have, and that particular crop likes it to be over here. So you're going to want to add some of this and whatever. So they don't exactly give you an option for polyculture stuff. And that's fine. That's great. But when doing gardening, the reason that you do gardening is to go out there and, I don't know, bond with nature and develop this beautiful romantic relationship with nature. And instead you're, I don't know, digging up a soil sample and mailing it. And I don't know, it takes something, it takes some of the beauty and culture out. So it's not as lovely and delightful. All right. Years passed while I did all of this. My theories evolved a bit, and I tended to do less soil tests and more focus on building rich soil. So I went from doing like, I don't know, I would do soil tests like from 5 different spots. So 5 different soil tests, and I would do it oftentimes twice a year. And sometimes if I'm getting a little anxiety over a spot, I might do it 3 times a year. But then I got, I don't know, bored with that, nonplussed. I was like, it was taking something away from why I was there to do it. And so I did it less and less and less, and instead just focused on, well, you know, to build soil is going to be really what I want to do anyway, and there is going to be a polyculture. I mean, and usually there's not anything too scary, but 20 years ago, in fact, here we are, we're in late January as we're recording this. So it was like 20 years ago to the day, I took my first ever PDC. And Rick Valley was a guest instructor. And I don't know, if you ever take an in-person PDC and you have a lot of guest instructors, some of the guest instructors are okay, and some of the guest instructors are like superheroes. And so I really liked Rick Valley. And in fact, he's in some of my videos. I know I've talked about him many times in my essays and stuff. I've got something I'm pretty sure I put into a podcast in the past where it's the story of the Douglas fir trees. And that was Rick Valley. And so, but all right, here I am 20 years ago at my first ever PDC. And Rick Valley talks about, it sounds like not only does he go to a lot of places to do permaculture designs, but he's also had decades of being like a landscape architect kind of guy and a landscape laborer kind of guy. And so he keeps going to all these different places. And it sounds like he did a lot of soil tests for years and years and years. But his conclusion was that he would do the soil tests, and then they would come back and make recommendations. And then as the years passed, he found that he was always doing the exact same thing no matter what the soil test said. So he just stopped getting the soil test. So let me see if I wrote this. So 20 years ago, I met Rick Valley. He had a similar story, only his go-to solution was deep mulch, a good 4 to 12 inches deep, depending on the material. And the mulch would change for different species. So like whatever it is you're trying to mulch, you would use a different kind of mulch. The way that he told the story was that he would get soil tests, put down deep mulch, and new soil tests would show dramatic improvement. And so after many years of this, he got into the habit of skipping the soil tests and got the same excellent results. There was only one time that deep mulch did not work. And in that case, he did do a soil test. So he did the deep mulch. It didn't work. After it didn't work, then he did a soil test. Like, why is this not working? I'm going to do a soil test and see if I can get any clues that way. So he did the soil test. And he found out that he had toxic levels of P and K, so phosphorus and potassium. The thing is that all soil tests start with NPK, so nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And then with the Albrecht method, you're going to really focus on calcium in the soil. And beyond that, I think now we focus a lot more on how much carbon is there in the soil. But there's going to be like more than a dozen different little nutrients. Like I remember boron was one. And I remember that there's different kinds of different flavors of boron that you might add to your soil, but it's a micronutrient. So you don't want to add very much. It's just kind of a dusting. But again, there's like, I don't want to say 20 things. It seems like it's not quite 20. It seems more like it's going to be something in the neighborhood of 15 to 16 different things that are tested for in a soil test. So, but the main ones are NPK, and that's the ones that most people talk about or did talk about for years until the Albrecht method came along. And then calcium, basically Albrecht felt that calcium was more important than NPK. And he had certain results. So the thing is that, so Rick Valley did his deep mulch. It didn't work. Then he did a soil test, and he found out that he had toxic levels of P and K. So too much P and K. And then he did a very fascinating thing that was so important to me because I didn't believe, because when I did the soil tests on my property at that time, 20 years ago, I was living on Mount Spokane. When I did the soil tests, I thought that my P and K levels were high, but I didn't think of them as being too high. And I was very confused. I was struggling to get things to grow. And I had this, the property that I had used to be for growing hay. And I kind of got the impression from talking to the old guy that used to own the land that he fertilized the hell out of it. And then basically it turned out he was starting to spend as much on fertilizer as he was getting paid for the hay. So he decided to get out of the hay business. And so the P and K accumulated. Oh, look, here's a soil test. And so, I can't read all the little things on there. But, all right. So I believe in hindsight, what happened is that the P and K accumulated mostly in the surface because that's where he was laying down the fertilizer, and there was like no nitrogen whatsoever, and so all of the soil there was really scrubby grasses. Like you could see wherever you walked, you can see the soil, and it's like, really, this used to be a place where you grew hay. But of course, what happened is that he grew the hay, and then he would cut all that organic matter down and bale it and sell the bales. And so each year he would get several crops of hay and then bale it and haul it off. So he's, in a way, hauling away all of the organic matter, slowly turning the soil into dirt. And then the way that the hay would survive is that he would just give it more and more fertilizer, but the P and K would accumulate, whereas the nitrogen would dissipate. So now I thought it was just high levels of P and K, so I didn't have to worry about P and K. But instead, as Rick helped me to understand, I had toxic levels of P and K in my soil from all that over-fertilization for so many different years. Okay. The fascinating thing is that what Rick did is he planted alder trees. Oh, and it says it there. And so there was only one time that deep mulch did not work. And in that case, he did do a soil test and found toxic levels of P and K. So he added alder trees throughout the system combined with deep mulch. The alder trees would take up a lot of P and K while putting extra nitrogen into the soil. So alder trees are nitrogen fixing trees, and they apparently tolerate toxic levels of P and K. So they're like drinking up all that P and K, taking it out of the system, and then putting nitrogen back into the system. And suddenly everything around these alder trees just came to life and did great. So, ta-da, there you go. That was an oddball thing, a very rare and unusual thing where the soil test did help. But simply adding deep mulch is almost always easier than what I was doing, building rich soil. So adding mulch to a system helps to build rich soil. But another really awesome ingredient at building rich soil is going to be to have a living root in the dirt where you're trying to build a rich soil. And then all of that does even better at building rich soil if you're going to irrigate. So if you're starting off with dirt, then dirt tends to dry out really, really fast. And most of your growies, even if you've got a bunch of mulch on there, aren't going to do so good with just dirt. Now, if you're going to mulch heavily and there's going to be some rainfall, then it's going to begin. You're going to start to build soil. Some of the organic matter at the bottom of the mulch is going to rot and feed the soil. And then also the plants that are growing there, the living root that's in there, it's going to be doing a lot of root exudate shedding. It's going to, so those little root hairs, those microscopic root hairs, it's going to put a root hair out, do its thing, and then it's going to sacrifice that root hair. And so that's putting organic matter into the soil of a different type. Now, before going on with this, okay, I want to touch into root exudate stuff, but hey, Samantha and Clay, I'm just sitting here. I'm going off on a tangent. Do you guys have anything to add at this point? Samantha?
Well, I was curious if all that root exudate and the stuff that the little worms do and all that, does that come up on your soil test? When you test, like, do you see like there's this much of the, the gooey stuff the worms make that hold the soil together and all those things that come out of the plants? When you have the polyculture, everybody is giving different things. Do you see that? Is there like a level of, I guess, is there like a fertility or I don't know what it would, not just the nitrogen but is there a way to measure that?
When you get the soil test back, it does tell you about organic matter. But I love that you talked about the earthworm, because as the earthworm moves through the soil, you actually said something about it. And it's like, I don't think I've ever heard anybody actually talk about that, but that's what I think about a lot.
Really? Because you see it. Like they create, when they make their hole, they create that, and that's structure of the soil. I mean, I think that's what they call tilth.
And so rather than the word tilth, which I kind of shy away from the word tilth, but it does. You're right. But I'm afraid newbies think it means something else than what it really means. I like to say soil structure, and that's exactly the word that you used. And a lot of people want to talk about soil aggregation or soil aggregates, and that is fascinating and good. But I love the phrase soil structure. And when I think of soil structure, I think of those 3-year-old worm tunnels that are being held together by the slime that the worms put into their little tunnels. And so they kind of exude this goo that kind of holds the tunnel open. And now, because of all these little worm tunnels all through the soil, it gives you soil structure. It holds the soil together in this shape. All those worm tunnels help to hold the soil in place. And it makes it so that water and air can move in and out of the soil better. And now your soil gets deeper and deeper and deeper because of all those worm tunnels made by worm slime. This is what's in my head. I know I've never written about it. I've never podcasted about it. I've never talked about it. But I'm so glad you brought up, you said it. You said structure, and you talked about the worm slime.
I think it's really important what they do. You know, I mean, you can have just a barren place with nothing growing and no vegetation and no even debris. And the worms will come out at night and go and get a piece of debris and bring it back until eventually there's a little pile around their hole. And I would look and see, what are all these little piles of duff and needles and bits? And you scrape that away and there's a hole. Because every night he goes out and gets a little bit. And then they also find each other, of course, one from hole to hole. So I just think it's really neat the way they create an environment in the depth of the soil.
Yes. Yeah. And it kind of comes back to this one thing that Sepp Holzer would do. He used his greenhouses not for what everybody else uses greenhouses for. The only thing he did with his greenhouses was to do worm breeding, earthworm breeding. And he had 4 different species of earthworm. One of those species, apparently their expertise was to burrow down 6 feet deep. And so he would spread these, like he would grab handfuls of these worms and fling them onto his hugelkulturs, which at the time were only 3 feet tall. But the idea is that they would carry a lot of this mulch down 6 feet deep. So now his topsoil is going from being maybe 3 inches deep to being 6 feet deep. And this is going to please so many different growies as the soil becomes. And now, not only that, but because they dug those holes 6 feet deep, there's air and water that's getting down there. So now the stuff that's near the surface isn't turning into a swamp so much. And then there's air getting down low. So now you can have all this life that starts to happen deeper in the soil, all thanks to these earthworms. Now, a lot of people think like, okay, you take dirt and you add earthworms and you have soil. And it's like, no, it's not that simple. I mean, the earthworms do a lot, but you got to give them the other ingredients, so they need that organic matter, which is generally going to be your higher carbon organic matter that they like. And they do pile it up near their little holes. But usually what you find piled up around the little holes is
their poo.
Popes. It's popes from the earthworms. And so that's what's usually piled up around there.
Eventually that can actually be the main composition of the soil on the surface, is really just earthworm castings. They've done so much pooping and they go down there and get minerals and all these things that the plant might not be able to reach, because they have to go down. Where I live, it's so dry in summer and it's so cold in winter that they hide. They're totally dormant and you wouldn't find them. And I don't know if I have the 6 feet deep ones, but they're down really far. And then when they wake up, they come and bring stuff that my little garden plants couldn't reach, those minerals, but they're bringing nutrients. or they're bringing minerals up. I don't know how much
Well,
nutrient.
The other thing that they do is that they find something yummy and they take it with them down deep. And they're like, I'm going to eat it down here while watching TV.
Yeah.
I'm going to watch Game of Thrones. I'm going to eat my leaves and have a little party, the superb owl party. And and now you're getting organic matter, more carbon down deep in the soil because, the earthworm drug it down in there. And so
yeah, that pile is the things that didn't go with them, because you can watch them and they'll take things with them, and then there's things that get scraped off, and that's what that pile is created about. So they're taking a lot more in there than I'm seeing.
So okay, and earthworms, it's just the beginning. It's like one species out of, let's say, 500 that are in your garden doing stuff. And granted, some of them are not your friends, but most of them are. But, as you build soil, these communities evolve with some bad actors and some good actors and some great actors. I think the earthworm is probably our most well-recognized soil-building soil critter. And so we're so very happy for that. Now, one last thing, comfrey is considered to be one of the premier guild plants for permaculture people. And not only do the leaves exude calcium from the bottom of the leaf, which then accumulates on the ground, but it turns out a little dusting of calcium on the soil makes earthworms super happy. And if you're making earthworms super happy, if you get a lot of earthworm activity around your comfrey plant, I think that makes your comfrey plant very happy. So now you're going to see a lot more wormholes right there, but also it helps having a slight dusting of calcium on the soil surface encourages your earthworms to breed. And so now you're going to have even more earthworms.
Yeah.
So, okay. So Samantha, but from the stuff I just read, and before I start talking more about root exudate, do you have anything else to add at this point?
I kind of have a question about the worms. Have you ever noticed that sometimes they have a coating of like really shimmery rainbow? To me, it just looks like super healthy. And then other times they just look kind of normal, but sometimes they're just iridescent with their coating and their gooiness there. And I just wondered if is that calcium, or do you know a way to get them to really thrive like that?
I don't. I can see it in my head, but I don't know if I'm just imagining it or I've ever seen it. I know that my interaction with earthworms is two main things. One, whenever it rains, if there's earthworms out on the ground, I'm stupid. I do earthworm rescue.
Of course, yeah.
Like 50, like, no, you're gonna die here. Let me take you over, and I feel like such an idiot. Is like,
well, I think it's so important.
Shouldn't you breed smart earthworms? And like Darwin has a theory about this. The ones that come out and go someplace that dries up and then they die, those earthworms shouldn't get a chance to breed. So I feel like I'm breeding stupid earthworms. But I'm like, no, you're awesome. I want you to go back into the soils. Don't come out here where you're going to dry up and die. And there's been a couple of them where it's like they look kind of crispy, but they still wiggle a little bit. And I'm like, here, I'm going to put a little soil on you.
I think there's more to it than we understand. They're coming up or crossing the road or doing dangerous things for a reason. I don't know what it is, but if he's doing his best to cross the road, I'm going to get him over there or whatever his purpose is.
I'm trying to not do earthworm rescue, but I still do it. All right. So I said that there was two interactions. So I see those, and those are always medium-sized earthworms. And then, of course, the second one is like I'm digging for some reason, because I rarely ever dig. But one of the things that I do is when a hugelkultur is nice and steep, then down here at the bottoms, it starts to kind of do this, you know, and I'll dig this stuff up to go put it back up at the top. But sometimes that's where some monster earthworms are hanging out. So I go to dig. I don't want to hurt the earthworms, but it's like I'll pull out these guys that are like 18 inches long. Like, well, aren't you a happy earthworm? Look at you. You are. So you're saying, do you notice this rainbow
The shimmer, especially on those big guys?
And I'm saying what I notice is that's a big fucking earthworm right there. That thing's huge. Don't you belong in Colombia or something? It's like people here in Montana.
Well, sometimes I'll see castings that look like as big as my finger. Like, and I've never seen the worm that does it, but
wow,
you know what a worm casting looks like, and those are big. So it must be a big guy who left that.
So when I get the giant earthworms, I, will take a picture because they're just so amazing and awesome, and but I never share the picture with anybody. I just look at it myself. Yeah, Shai Halud. So I haven't. I'll try to keep an eye out for this shimmer that you're talking about. And while I can imagine the shimmer, I got to say, like, I'm not sure what would cause the shimmer. Maybe calcium. But
there's a few sources online that seem to think that they might be like follicles that help the worms move through the soil, and you see it because light is reflecting off of it, where you usually don't see it. So maybe just a certain angle of the light. I seem to notice it's when they're extra slimy, and so like I don't know if maybe the slime is highlighting these follicles or it's something else entirely. But yeah, when I was looking it up just now, it seemed that there were a lot of differing opinions on it.
Okay.
That's
Which,
cool.
by the way, as you know, Clay, now's a good time to, like, as for the stuff we just talked about, and I'm going to go into talking about root exudates in a moment. Do you have anything to bring up at this time?
I think the one thing that stood out to me is that alder is, you mentioned it fixing nitrogen, and that's not typically like a legume tree. And so I find alder really interesting. And I just wanted to give a plug for what an awesome little tree with those cute little cones. It's one of my favorites.
I believe they're called catkins. And yeah, it is a nitrogen fixing tree that is not a legume. And it's a fascinating little thing. All alders are pretty cool. But another thing is alders are generally quite thirsty. So it's difficult to get alders established in a lot of places, especially here in drier country. But I kind of think that maybe if you had enough mulch and maybe some other things to help, that it might do fine. This is a good time to mention something also while we're talking about trees that need a lot of water. Cottonwood is a variety of tree that needs a lot of water.
Huh.
And when we put the teepee in 11 years ago, right where we were building the teepee, and we're also going to build the berm around the teepee, there was this little cottonwood whip. And we were all kind of, I don't know, it was like maybe 18 inches tall. And we were all kind of talking about it like, well, let's leave it. I mean, it probably isn't going to make it here because it's so dry in this spot, but let's give it a chance. And now it's like, I don't know, 25, 30 feet tall. And but the thing is, on one side is the teepee. So when the water lands on the teepee, it all gets shed off over to where the cottonwood is. And then on the other side is the berm. And so, I think most of the water goes into the berm, but any water that doesn't kind of works its way towards that cottonwood, because of course with the berm or the hugelkultur, things tend to be wetter at the bottom than at the top. And then of course that whole sun scoop shape that's 15 feet tall around the teepee is helping to reduce wind, so it's not going to be as dry. So now that cottonwood is getting by. It could have been an alder. And so
Sure, yeah.
some people have kind of said, maybe should we take that down? And I'm leaving it. I'm gonna leave it there. So I don't think it's threatening anything. I think it's looking beautiful. So
Yeah,
all right.
It's neat how a structure, or in your case the teepee, all the moisture is stored. That comes there for winter is just stored all summer because there's nothing to make it go away. And the hugel berm the same. So he's got tons of water, even when we have our dry season, because of the storage. I think it's a great way to keep water.
We should go and take video of that cottonwood tree when it's like in full green and talk about it, because there's not enough water there to support a cottonwood, and yet that cottonwood is thriving. And so what a beautiful microclimate thing to talk about. I mean, I keep saying we've got like 500 really fascinating things to make 500 fascinating YouTube videos, and we keep not doing it. And I hope we get to it. But and I know,
We'll
Samantha, you keep videoing some things, and then you send the video to Andreas, and Andreas has made a couple of videos from the video you take.
Okay,
Now,
fun.
I thought they turned out pretty nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's plenty more where that came from. But, okay, I'm now going to talk about root exudates before we go on to the next section of today's thing. When you do a soil test, it comes back with NPK, calcium, boron, copper, a bunch of, these are all elements. And granted, some of the things that'll break it down into some slight variations, but still elements, nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium. These are elements, not molecules. But of course, generally they're attached to something to make a molecule of something. But this is a chemical analysis, and but I kind of want to make the point of, like, when you eat an apple, and I don't know what the chemical analysis is of an apple. You're probably not eating the apple, because it's like if I were to make a bowl of nitrogen and a bowl of potassium and so on and so forth, and gave you a spoon for each, I don't think anybody here would eat any of that. But what you would eat is an apple, and the apple is going to contain not only a bunch of different molecules, which are going to be, but it's going to contain a bunch of different, I'm going to say, life organisms. There's a lot of life in an apple that you're going to eat fresh, even if it's been stored a month. When you go to eat that, there's a bunch of life in that apple. And, I would say most of it's probably going to be carbon and water, but there's malic acid giving it that flavor. And there's a buffet of different acids and a buffet of different carbons, carbohydrates, things of that nature. There's a bunch of stuff in there that doesn't break down NPK very well. Now, so I bring that up because I think plants are the same way. If you go out and put a bunch of nitrogen on your soil, the plants are going to take off. But I kind of can't help but think that, would they do better getting apples than getting NPK? And I guess what I'm trying to say is that before people were putting stuff on the soil in order to be able to adjust the soil chemistry so that way the crop would do better, what did plants enjoy before that? And I want to say that the thing that they enjoyed was going to be, sure, all kinds of minerals in the soil, water and air, and then other kinds of organic matter, in the soil is going to be part of it. But I'm going to say a thing that I'm making up, and I could be wrong, but I'm going to say that I think that their favorite food, the thing that they like to eat the most, is going to be root exudate from species that are not them. So like if we're talking about a carrot in the soil, then carrot, if there's a whole bunch of carrots all in one spot and there's root exudate from another carrot, I think our carrot does not want that. But if there's an apple tree, I think our carrot's going to say, nom, 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 that is yummy. That's my favorite thing. And then there could be root exudate from a bunch of other things growing in the soil nearby. And those are the things that are the favorite things of the carrot, not NPK, calcium, etc. Now, granted, if your iron levels are off or your boron levels are off or any of those things, then the carrot's going to be less likely to take up what it thinks is yummy. However, at the same time, its favorite thing to eat is going to be like, let's say, apple root exudate. I'm making this up. I don't know what a carrot's favorite thing to eat actually is, but I'm making this up. And I'm going to say like, okay, let's suppose we have an aged soil with good soil structure, like we were talking about earlier. That soil is also going to contain a lot of mycelium. And it's already been proven that the root exudate of one plant gets transferred to another plant 10 times more when you have an aged mycelium in the soil. So, therefore, if we go to an organic carrot farm, they till many times before they start to grow the carrots because they're trying to get rid of weeds.
Yeah, they're breaking up all that mycelium.
And then they're going to exactly. They're breaking up the mycelium. They're killing the mycelium. Every time you till, you lose 30% of your organic matter. And so a big part of that organic matter is going to be mycelium. It's also going to be all those little worm tunnels. They're going to be utterly destroyed. And all the other life in the soil, once they get overexposed to air, they kind of burn up and die. And just the action of the soil moving around from tilling causes a lot of them to die. And so what happens is that when you till, and you plant a bunch of stuff in there, the first year, whatever you plant does great because it's living off of all those dead bodies. And now there's a lot of air in the soil. And plus, not only that, but when the carrot tries to go down in the soil and it's all loose, it's like, oh, I love this. I can move around. I can make big carrots. Oh, straight carrots. Very marketable carrots. But there's also less of the food that it wants to eat. And when there is root exudate available, it's nothing it wants. And so then the only thing it can turn to is whatever it is that the farmer provided. And so how well does the farmer provide for the carrot? Well, you do end up with a carrot that looks so good that it's marketable. And some of the farmers are going to go out and do a bricks test. And like, okay, is it better? You know, that's another way of measuring it.
Absolutely. Bricks measures the sugars. Just in case anybody didn't know that.
Okay. Yes. Bricks test measure sugars. But moving on, I'm kind of thinking like, what makes a truly glorious carrot, a carrot that we really, really enjoy? And I'm thinking that the primary ingredient that carrot needs more than anything, that it wants more than anything, is the root exudate of non-carrot species. And that's its favorite ice cream, because the stuff that's being fed to the carrot is not a great ice cream. And on top of that, the carrot's growing in this pool of death, you know, because it got tilled and all those little organisms are now dead. Now, granted, there's some organisms coming back, and but the carrots are gonna get all dug up in a few months, and then the soil is going to get tilled again in order to, again, fight the weeds. And of course, the weeds are coming in because Mother Nature is kind of like, okay, you fucked this up bad, but it's cool, man. I'm gonna fix it. I've got some agents coming in now, and we're gonna start some new species growing there. We're gonna fix it for you. We're gonna fix your mistake, and then they come and rip that out too. Nature, fortunately, is very, very patient. And then part of what the farmer does is like, I'm so sick of this plant coming in here when I'm trying to grow a monocrop. What I've decided to do is to pass a law saying that weed is bad. Like, what? How does that work? All right. Sorry, I'm going off on too many tangents all at once.
Part of what we're doing with the carrot is we're trying to store. A carrot is the starchy body that's a storage body of that material that's been pulling from the sun and from the soil. And when you grow a carrot in deep, magnificent, dark garden soil full of worms, full of minerals, that carrot is sweet. It tastes like you made a candied carrot. And it still looks pretty. It's bright orange and beautiful. But the flavor is completely different than if you were to buy a carrot in a bag that is grown for its appearance and its uniformity, but those minerals are not there in the soil. And all those, the polyculture, which is what we're going to talk about here with those different root exudates, is what's creating that environment for the carrot to be magnificent. And for us as a gardener, you can only eat so much food. I mean, I might as well be the best carrot that I can possibly eat, instead of buy a bag of carrots that are pretty, but they don't hold those minerals and they don't hold that nutrition. And when the plant, a carrot, is storing the energy for you in a starchy body, that's going to taste like sugar. That's how you know that carrot was healthy and it has stored energy for you to have through the winter. And those sugars are what you're looking for because the starch tastes like sugar. Well, if you buy a carrot that's not sweet, it doesn't have that nutrition. It doesn't meet its Brix test, which is what Paul was talking about earlier. That's why farmers are testing for Brix, is to find out how much sugar was stored in those roots. And it's about the mineralization in the soil. It's about the polyculture, the health of the soil. And if you don't have a particular mineral in your soil, but you have extreme health in your soil, the plant can adapt for that. Maybe you're a little low on boron or you're a little low on something else. It doesn't matter that much if the soil has fertility, if it has that balance of other nutrients that the plant can draw on to be healthy.
As
I know
an
you wanted to go on to the
anecdotal,
next thing.
sure. Well, I have just one little fun story that kind of speaks to all of that. 2 years ago, I planted carrots in a row, and they did fairly well, and everything was great. And one seed happened to fall out of my packet onto my mowable meadow that was adjacent to the garden plot that I was working on. And that was the biggest, best, and sweetest carrot that I had that year. And so, yeah, just in a nutshell, I think that all of this becomes kind of self-evident when you give it a shot. So try not tilling and put that carrot seed somewhere where you maybe didn't expect it to be perfect, and look what good things happen.
I love those kinds of stories. That's like, to me, that's the ultimate in gardening. And I've got so much. I mean, I kind of feel like when people grow their gardens on a flat space and everything is in rows, to me, it's like, okay, I saw those dudes over there with the tractors and this is what they were doing. So I'm just doing it on a smaller scale. And so it's like the whole thing about the row really has to do with tractors. And it's kind of like, I love the idea that the gardening that we're doing is more about the tractors can all go fuck off. And in fact, when we make hugelkulturs, tractors can't get in there. And now I'll sometimes plant things in a row, but what I'll do is I'll do it in a diagonal line going up a hugelkultur. And it's because I've got one of two reasons. One, I've never grown this before, whatever it is that I'm planting. I want to see if it's all in a row, I know I planted it. It didn't volunteer. And then I'll also mark the row. I'll usually put a piece of string, cotton string, but from the 2 points, and I'll put a label on one end. Usually I write it on like we clip out pop cans, like aluminum cans, and we bend the edges down so the edges are soft, and then we use a ballpoint pen and we write on the blank side to say what it is. So it'll last like 6 months.
Wow, that's a great idea.
The thing is that if it's something I've never grown before, then A, when it starts to come up, I'll be able to tell what it is. And on top of that, B, I'll be able to see like where on a hugelkultur does it love to live? Does it like being in the middle, at the top, probably at the bottom? Like everybody loves being at the bottom. And so, but then the whole row is mixed into a polyculture of stuff. And so sometimes, but the second reason to grow things in a row like that is because sometimes it's one boot that helped me plant it, and it's another boot that's going to help me harvest it. And the boot helping me harvest it, and this was something that Brian Kirkbliet told me in Bellingham, Washington. I said, why are you growing everything in rows? And he said, whenever we do a polyculture, then the new interns that come start pulling up all of our food plants thinking that they're weeds. But if we grow them in a row, they know that's the one to keep. And like, so anyway, it's gotten to be, it's because we've just been burned so many times by so many interns pulling out the food plants. And you try to explain it to them and they nod their head and say, uh-huh. And then they go pull out some more food plants. And so it's like, okay, that's fair. So I feel like it's a way for people to learn. But I also, there's other ways. I mean, I got so much to say about that. Like, how do they tell the difference between a garlic and an onion? And then, but it's getting into a bunch of different weeds. All right. The thing is that in my mind, there's the whole thing about the worm tunnels and the worm slime holding the tunnels open and that soil structure. And I want to have not just soil structure, but aged soil structure. Now, and when I'm starting, a lot of times it's dirt. There's no soil structure there. There's no worms there. There's no organic matter. So I could till it 100 times and I won't lose any organic matter because there was none to begin with. And I won't lose any soil structure because there was none to begin with. And I won't lose any earthworms because there's none to begin with. And so it's till all you want. In fact, till something in. That'll be great. But in my mind, soil structure, and that's the word that I use because when I say tilth, too many people get the wrong idea. Oh, I'm going to go run the rototiller. That'll give it tilth. It's like, that's not exactly what it means. Okay. And then there's the whole thing about the soil aggregate, but those are the soil scientists are the ones that are keen on the aggregate, but it's like, okay, all right, fine. Soil structure. The other thing is to me, what's in my head in an enormous way is this stuff about how a carrot loves the many, many flavors of root exudate from many, many plants. Loves it. That's its favorite food. And it's kind of like in organic gardening, we've been following the soil tests and we've been feeding those carrots what we think that they need in order produce something that looks like a carrot. And I kind of feel like, I don't know, I want to call it Nazi gardening, like Nazi organic. Like, you will eat this and like it, and then you'll grow into a carrot. And it's like, that's, I don't know, it seems hostile and mean and not, it doesn't seem like gardening is kind of like, look, I've made Mother Nature my personal bitch. I'm forcing that bitch to make me a fucking carrot. I don't know. Do I sound crazy? I've got these two different ideas.
If we have, we have a certain amount of education and we know what a carrot wants and we can study that, I think that there's always going to be more to it than we can study. And if we let the carrot choose, we provide everything and the carrot can go get what it needs. So we've got lettuces and beets and maybe some garlics and some other things growing all around there. Everybody's providing something different. Maybe we have some lovely mulch and some lovely manure. And then these plants need different things at different times based on their growth. And I don't have to figure that out. I can guess, but if I get it all in the hugel bed, when I build the hugel bed, the plant gets to go and get whatever it needs whenever it needs that. And I don't have to be the one to decide, you get this now. It's like, you've got it all. Whenever you want it, to whatever degree, it's there for you. And I prefer that as a way, because I don't know everything. And I'd rather see what they choose. What do they do with it?
I agree with everything that you just said. Diversity on the inside as well as diversity on the outside. And so I kind of feel like a lot of people don't like the way I grow food because they say it looks like a giant weed patch. And in a way, I suppose by their standards, it is. And when I look at what they grow and they love, I think that that is an example of making Mother Nature your personal bitch. I think that what I'm doing, it's a different aesthetic. It's a different way to do it. And on top of that, I want to develop techniques where the weeds become our foods. I mean, right now the weeds are our foods. We got lots of weeds growing here that we eat, but the things that we think of as our gardening crops, I want those, even the annuals, to become our weeds here. And that's, but now we're getting into landrace gardening and stuff like that. I think that the big thing is that when we talk about growing things in rows, those people with those aesthetics think that what I'm doing looks like an ugly weed patch. And to me, it's 1,000 times more beautiful than their idea of the best garden. It's just a different set of aesthetics. But I do believe also what you're saying, like if you have diversity on the inside, diversity on the outside, which we talked about at the hugel culture thing, I think that then almost anything will do well. And then the next thing is like we've got an abundance of different things growing all the time. And like this particular spot is awesome for potatoes. And there's another spot 5 feet away, which potatoes don't do well, but other things do well. And now those other things can have the roots touch with the potatoes that are doing well, and they can have a trade. And there's going to be this aged soil structure complete with mycelium that's going to help them with that exchange that they want to do.
Yeah, that's excellent. I think the rows or the wild garden patch kind of depends on, I think gardening is all about your joy. So for you and your personal garden, you're going to love to have it just be a wild, crazy idea of what everybody do whatever they want. But like for me, if I'm going to grow a garden for my dad, he's going to be happier if the onions are in a row, if he can find them, if he can see everything. So, I'll do rings, like there's a circle and if I do a row, I'll mix it up so there's a pattern. So the plants aren't in monoculture, they're having someone different next to them, but it's still organized. And for myself, I don't care. I'll just throw it all out there because I love to see what happens. But if I want to do it for somebody who will prefer it in a row, or when you have your boots and you want to make sure they can go find the carrots when it's time to eat. I think it makes a lot of sense to find a way to have an organization in your polyculture, depending on who's going to be enjoying that garden.
Right. I agree. And I like the idea of, through all of this, to come up with a way to grow all the foods that people want to grow, that is like double the food for 1/10 the effort. Because those guys that are out there growing things in rows, they're tilling, they are doing a lot of weeding, they generally irrigate more, and they have to do soil tests and lay down a lot of fertilizer.
Well, you'll have to irrigate more. If you're going to tear up that mycelium, you're going to have to continually put water in, because the mycelium is a huge sponge. And if you allow that to proliferate and go all through your soil, so much water can be stored. But yeah, if you're tearing it up all the time, you're going to have to add more water.
All right. I'm going to move on to the next bit, unless you guys got anything else to add. Let's see. About 4 months after meeting Rick. Oh, I love this story. I don't know if I've ever shared this. I think this is us. This is our everything. Okay. About 4 months after meeting Rick, I was at a friend's house, and not that it matters, but this is in West Seattle. And I mentioned that because I know that, Samantha, didn't you live in West Seattle for a little bit?
I did, yeah.
So
lovely.
I was just visiting my friend because the PDC that I took was nearby. And anyway, all right. So I'm visiting a friend. I'm at my friend's house. I'm going to be there for like a week. And then it turns out I came back later. But okay, I'm at my friend's house, and my friend asked me to have a look at his yard. And it's mostly lawn that was mowed too short, and a couple of trees. And of course, whenever I see this and people mow their grass too short, I try to tell them to mow it higher, and they can't. They just can't. And it's not like this guy is a golfer or anything, nor has he got any reason. He just like, I don't want to talk about it. I need my grass to be short. The end. There's nothing more to say. And it's like, and I've given up, but I did house sit for him at one point. And like years later, after this conversation, and I mowed it high. And when he came back, he's like, wow, the lawn looks amazing. What did you put on it? And I said, nothing. Nothing. I did irrigate a little bit because his soil was so bad, but that's another story for another day. And but for now, okay. Oh, this is so good. I'm at a friend's house, and my friend asked me to have a look at his yard. Mostly lawn that was mowed too short, and a couple of trees, and a large hedge out front. There were 2 trees that were the same. I don't remember what kind of tree it was, but one planted in the front yard and one in the backyard. They're both 8 feet tall and looked pretty sad. The one in the front yard looked worse. So apparently he bought these 2 trees that were identical at the same time, and he planted them something like 7 or 8 years earlier, and they never did very well growing in a lawn. And they had a pathetic leaf count. They were about 8 feet tall, but they just looked scraggly. They did not look strong and healthy and vibrant. Okay. I suggested to my friend that he get a half dozen bales of organic hay and lay that hay about 6 to 8 inches thick around the tree in the front yard in a sort of donut shape around the tree. Now, if you're going to lay down hay 6 to 8 inches thick, I would probably go 8 to 12 inches away from the tree. So a donut shape, there's a hole in the middle, and the tree is in the hole in the middle, right? So there's still going to be grasses and stuff growing right there, but 6 to 8 inches of mulch in a giant donut shape. I think we went with about 3 or 4 foot thick, like 3 or 4 feet wide from the edge of the donut hole to the outside of the donut shape.
Okay.
Okay. 6 to 8 inches thick. He thought it was a really dumb idea because he had never seen anybody do this. Therefore, it has to be a bad idea. This has to be like, oh, I want to be like Sepp Holzer. This is my favorite part. Or this is also like Gerbot. Gerbot does this. This is my favorite part. And then later there'll be another favorite part and another favorite part. Okay. Oh, I get this all the time. Somebody's having a problem. I spell it out for them. They're sure it's a stupid thing because they've never heard of it or seen it. And it's like, fair enough. It must be stupid. But okay. So this is my good friend. And I mean, like at this time, I think I've known him 20 years. This is my good friend who knows next to nothing about horticulture. And he's telling me, a certified master gardener, and I'm also a certified advanced master gardener, and a person with massive experience. Not to mention the fact I just recently completed a PDC, and he's telling me that I am wrong. It's like, how do you know I'm wrong? You don't know shit about this. So, okay, this position seems to be the utter core of what prevents all amazing things from getting implemented. I offered, okay, he's a good friend, and he's telling me that I'm wrong. So I offered to buy all the hay and do all the work, and he said, whatever. So I did it. I went out. First of all, finding organic hay is hard, especially in West Seattle. I think I had to drive like an hour to get some organic hay. And then I'm driving a car. Here in Montana, everything's a rig, but I got to tell you, this was a car, and it was filled with these 6 bales, including the bales sitting in the passenger seat. So I found the organic hay. I drove all the way out there. I paid this exorbitant price per bale, and I brought it back and I laid it down, and he hated the look of it. He thought it looked really junky. Oh, this is my favorite part. Okay. He thought it looked really, but he allowed it. And it's like, this is a good friend of mine. I'm glad to do it for him because he's such a good friend and we've been friends for so long. So I'm doing all of this stuff for him, even though it is pissing him off that I'm doing it. And he asked. So he allowed it, even though he felt like his shitty yard was made shittier. A couple of weeks later, 2 weeks later, the tree was clearly far healthier than the sister tree in the backyard. So the front yard tree looked shittier than the backyard tree. And they both look shitty. But now, after 2 weeks, this tree in the front yard was way healthier. Like the leaf count was double, maybe triple. It was way, and it may have been a little taller now too, but it's hard to tell.
Cool.
Right? But it's clearly doing better after 2 weeks. A couple of weeks after that, the tree in the front yard was now a solid 3 feet taller.
Wow.
And there were so many leaves, you couldn't see the sun through the tree.
Nice.
The leaf mass was probably 20 times that of the sister tree in the backyard. The donut, okay, so this donut shape that's around the tree, the donut came within 3 feet of the hedge. So this is my favorite part. So part of the hedge grew up a foot or two taller than the rest of the hedge. and thicker. Like it was like boom, super hedge. So now my friend complained that his ugly hedge was now lopsided. I'm ruining everything. Even though half the hedge was clearly healthier, the lopsidedness made it uglier. Whereas I embrace lopsidedness. I think lopsidedness is the best. It's art. But he wants this. He's trying to pursue this manicured look, but he doesn't know what he's doing. And so he foolishly asked me. What he really wanted is to talk to an experienced landscaper who is going to like come in and lay down some fertilizer, and suddenly everything is going to be a little greener and lusher, but evenly, and stuff like that. And instead, he foolishly asked me. As much as my friend complained, he was also intrigued, and I think now he's behind it. But of course, I did it all wrong because he wants it to be even, and now he's making the hour-long trip to go buy that organic hay, and he wants to do more of it. And now he wanted to talk about growing a garden, and we did that too. And all his garden, all he wanted to grow was tomatoes. And now he did have this next door neighbor that was growing tomatoes in her yard, and I think he kind of liked her. And so he was kind of like, can you help me grow tomatoes? So we did. Now, her tomato plants grew to be like, I don't know, 18 inches tall, and each tomato plant had like 4 tomatoes on it. It was really sad. And now on his plot, I think we planted 6 tomato plants, but it was all with hay mulch. And he had a jungle. He had, out of these 6 tomato plants, he probably had 200 pounds of tomatoes. He had way too many tomatoes. And so he was giving his neighbor tomatoes. And of course, he had no idea what he was doing. And now she's curious about what he's doing. And all right, that's another story for another day. But it's like, is it really a garden if all you're growing is tomatoes? But that's all he wanted to grow. And it's because she's growing tomatoes. Okay. Oh, there it says it. We did it too with more of that organic hay, but that's another story for another day. And that was another thing too. It was all lawn where we planted this new tomato garden, and we just smothered all the lawn with a thick layer of the hay. Which the donut was also the same thing. We were smothering the lawn with the donut. Okay. There, I've told my story. Do you guys? We've got a couple more things to talk about during this thing we're recording today, but do you guys have any comments about the story of my friend in West Seattle and his trees and his yard and maybe his tomatoes?
Well, I do think that the quickest way to help your soil or your plants do better is to mulch them. You cover the soil with something wonderful and organic that is going to hold any moisture. When you do smother all that grass, it dies and its roots die. And that's just instant nitrogen to give to your plants. You also, if you cover the soil with anything, you'll find all the little worms come up and lay their poop all around on that layer between the earth and your new surface. There's no predators to get them. As soon as you put a covering over there, they're safe to come up. They don't have to hide underground anymore. And then everybody else runs around, in that little space between the top of the earth and the bottom of your mulch becomes this whole new world. And you'll have centipedes and earwigs and all kinds of little creatures coming up, and they hunt each other, and they also poop, and they do their activities that will create that health of your soil. So I think it's the quickest way to change something is just to add a mulch layer. And again, it's the thing where we don't have to figure it out. I don't have to go figure out my fertilizer and pour it in there. I can just cover the land with good hay or other organic mulch, and they figure it out for me.
Now, I could have laid down straw instead of hay.
Or a lovely pile of lovely leaves, if you like. But the hay's going to have a lot of nitrogen, and it seemed like that's what you experienced with your tree. The right away fix is giving it that nitrogen.
So I would, because I'm looking at all of this and I'm seeing that the tree has a poor leaf count and the tree just looks sad. And so I'm thinking, well, yeah, you're growing in a lawn and the lawn isn't looking really great either. It looks a little sparse. And I'm kind of thinking like, and when I look at the dirt that the lawn's growing in, it looks like dirt. It doesn't look like soil. So clearly what he's been doing is he mows his lawn too short. And then he bags the lawn clippings, which is the perfect recipe to transform soil into dirt. And so he bags the lawn clippings and he puts it into the green bin that the city of Seattle has provided him.
Yeah, because he could save that and have his own mulch.
Oh, there's so much to say for my friend. And so here I am. He is a musician and a poet and a writer. And he is not a gardener, but he's got a yard and some stuff. And so he does this, he does what he thinks is the thing to do. And he's kind of mimicking what he's seen other people do. And that's kind of it. And then there's other things like he sees his neighbor growing a tomato plant and he's like, oh, I want to grow a tomato plant too. And it's like, but what do I do? I don't even know where to begin with that. I mean, where she's growing it, she's clearly ripped out every speck of grass and she comes through every day and rips out any new speck of grass because it's what she has is dirt and a tomato plant in the dirt. And it's a sad little tomato plant, which never looked, but she waters it all the time. And she plucks out any weeds. So, I don't know. I kind of feel like most people, and that's another thing too, is like my friend cares deeply about the environment. And we would have who cares more wars all the time. And I got a lot to say about those discussions. But the thing is both of these people care about the environment and want to do these things, but they also want it to be really easy. But okay. Oh, that opens up hundreds of hours of things to talk about. But coming back to this mulch, the grass is going to be very aggressive and tough to compete with, but the tree clearly had a low leaf count. Clearly the tree is nitrogen hungry, and the grass is all looking pretty sad too. And then when I looked at the dirt, it's like almost cement. It's so hard and it's so light colored. It's definitely not soil. So yeah, if I smother the grass will die and act as its own mulch, but I gotta smother it. I gotta be complete about it. Now, a lot of people laying down hay, they're very worried. You lay down hay, you're going to get there's going to be seeds in the hay and they're going to take off. And it's like, don't see it very often, but yeah, I've seen it once in a while. And when that happens, I throw more hay over that. And now I'm done. Or I throw some other kind of mulch. Now, granted, what would be really terrific is to, redirect all of this organic matter that's coming from all these sources on his property, stop putting it into that green bin and start putting it out in different places to do different jobs out here. But I can't believe that I'm saying but I'm saying but the hay was a hard enough sell. And it's like, now you're going to, because I love the idea of a mulch being all kinds of wonka doodle. Like, we're going to make a donut, but it's going to take us like a month to make a donut from all the different bits of organic matter we pulled from all these different places. And we piled it up and we just slowly made a donut around the tree. So, however, because I did it rather instantly and the results were rather amazing and rather instant, then I think that that went a long, long ways. And I think I finally got him to stop putting stuff into the green bin. I also got him to stop using any kind of pesticides. And I also got him to stop. I kind of feel like if you want to have some fertilizer of some kind, that's okay. But let's get you something like the hay. Oh, why use hay? So I used hay because all signs said we need nitrogen. And so that's hay. Now, if they didn't need nitrogen for some reason or other, organic straw would have been better. But, and of course, both of you, I'm sure, are well versed. Why organic? Why not use non-organic hay in this case?
For the same reason we don't want to spray our lawn with pesticide. Because it takes a lot of pesticide and herbicides to make that hay grow perfect and uniform. Just like the food in the grocery store, like it's got a certain amount of marketability, and it needs to be pretty, and it needs to grow. It needs to grow year after year in the same soil, the same crop. So they put a lot of stuff on it. So if you get an organic farmer putting organic hay, there's going to be more mineralization in that soil, and so that hay you're getting is going to be richer for your plants, and it won't have the pesticides that are going to destroy your garden, kill your tree.
All hay and straw that is not organic definitely contains persistent herbicides, and they last like 10 years. That's their half-life. They have a half-life of 7 to 11 years. So if you put this non-organic hay down, the tree will die because the tree is already struggling. And so, granted, you're going to give it all this nutrition and you're going to give it poison. However, the persistent herbicides tend to be broadleaf herbicides, which means it only kills anything with a leaf, with a broadleaf. It does not kill grass. So the grass is going to be like, I'm getting all this great food. I'm so happy. But the hedge is going to be sad. The tree is going to be sad. Everything's going to be sad. So it's got to be organic. Okay. I think that there's, all kinds of different mulches that we could talk about now, what their effect would be. But because I observed that there was a strong need for nitrogen in this spot, I decided to go with hay. Because hay is like not yet compost. If you just took hay and you got it wet, it would compost all by itself. So it's going to effectively compost in place, which is going to, as it breaks down on the bottom side, which is touching the soil, it's going to feed the soil. Okay. Anything more about my friend in West? So Clay, do you got anything?
No, I think I'm good on this one.
Okay. All right. I want to mention Back to Eden gardening. So this is a guy on the Olympic Peninsula, and he'll lay out wood chips 3 to 8 inches thick, and then he does the gardening. And so I've never heard of him doing a soil test or anything like that, but I have heard of people who have tried to do his technique, and there's a couple of big problems with the technique. I mean, it's great technique. I mean, basically he's doing a deep mulch, which is wonderful. It's a very high carbon mulch, and that can work. It does work. It is great. There's a couple of caveats. Caveat number 1. If you're going to put a whole bunch of wood chips on your soil, and it ain't soil, it's dirt, it could take you 10 to 20 years until a garden starts to present itself, because there's not enough soil life to start breaking down those wood chips. And so it's kind of like nothing happens. You lay down all these wood chips and nothing happens. So there's been a lot of people who have tried to emulate this whole process, and they did not have success because of that. The other big caveat, the reason why I think you probably shouldn't even try. I mean, there are ways to try it and have it work, but I think almost everybody is going to get in too much of a rush and it's gonna not work for them. And here's what it is it's like, so somebody has a yard with a bunch of trees in it, and they got grass, and then they spray a persistent herbicide to make it so that for the next 10 years or longer, they don't have to spray their grass anymore. And so all of the dandelions die, all of the yarrow dies, all of the things that are not grass dies. And then it's like that big maple tree in the yard. Is that a type of grass? No, it is not. It doesn't. It might just get sick and stunted, but there's a chance that it will die. And so then they call the arborist and have the arborist come out, and they say, we need you to remove this dead tree. It died for no reason. And well, we know what the reason is, doesn't matter. So the arborist comes and takes the tree down, and they chip it. Then they try to find some sucker to take the wood chips. And there's somebody who's all excited about the Back to Eden gardening, and is like, I want mountains and mountains of wood chips because I'm going to do Back to Eden gardening. So now they've got all these wood chips that have taken in all that persistent herbicide. It's in the wood chip, and it's going to last years and years and years. And so their garden is basically poisoned. The only thing that they can grow is grass in this place where they're trying to grow vegetables. So this is why I say for most people, it doesn't work. And I also say with all of my stuff, never get a wood chipper, never use wood chips. There's a way to get wood chips that are going to work for you, but it's a long and complicated process. And on top of that, even if I explain it carefully to somebody 7 times, they still get the wrong thing. And then they're angry that suddenly they've got persistent herbicides where they want to have a garden. So the wood chips option may be different for different climates. I would say that there is some truth to that as well. So if you have a lot of, if you live in a tropical climate and you lay down a lot of wood chips, they're going to disappear pretty fast. As the soil microorganisms, are very hungry and they eat that stuff right up. And then there's going to be places like where they have, what's the word for it? Peat moss, where they have peat moss and they harvest the peat moss. Basically, the organic matter there has accumulated year after year after year, and now they can go and cut it away. And here's some 10,000-year-old peat moss. And so, which they turn around and sell. But that's it took one kind of organic matter and made another kind of organic matter. But yeah, it is going to work different in different climates. But overall, I would have to say that everybody listening to this right now, you're going to be far happier just not touching wood chips, not making them, not getting them, not importing them. Just don't touch it. In fact, generally speaking, don't import, because even if it's organic hay, they only need 3 years to be able to label themselves as organic, which means that 4 years ago, they put down persistent herbicides. Those persistent herbicides are still in this organic product. And so, now, granted, most of the time that you go to get organic hay, it's probably going to be something where it's more like at least 7 years or at least 10 years old. But it's possible that you could have organic hay that still has persistent herbicides in it. So it's better to just find a way to do these things without importing anything. All right. Any questions or comments about the Back to Eden stuff? Really good and really bad at the same time.
I think one thing that comes to mind also is when I have used a lot of wood chips, I get a lot of pill bugs, and so there's kind of and I think this goes back to climate a bit. You have some give and take where you have to watch what's happening with what you're using, and so I think that I'm also in the middle, more on the avoid wood chip spectrum, not only for everything you mentioned, but also the ability to bring the happiness for pests that might want to just destroy my garden. Whereas lawn clippings and stuff that I have readily available on site, they tend to do that less for me.
Anything you have on site is going to be better, because if you've got organic standards or way beyond organic standards, then all of this excess growies that you got here that are like, because well, all of those are now beyond organic, and they're going to be an excellent mulch. And then on top of that, as you feed back into the system, now you're going to have 10 times, 20 times more growies on your plot. And a lot of that is stuff that's going to be an excellent candidate for chop and drop. So now you're just growing all this organic matter that's going to help refeed all of your systems. That is the premium stuff. And then if you're like thinking like, okay, I want to try to grow some stuff that, but I'm starting with such dirt. It's such terrible dirt. Then there are ways to bring in some fertility. I think, and boy, I'm going to catch hell for saying this, but I think the number, and I'm sure both of you know this already. If here you are on a plot of dirt and you're trying to grow some stuff and you're a little low on organic matter to put on there, and you're like, I need to add some fertility. What's your first thing that you're going to add as fertility?
Well, you can pee around the plants.
That's where I'm going.
You can also, like, we all produce a lot of kitchen scraps, so like all the little peels and bits that we would, give to the chickens can be put underneath that layer of mulch. And that's a ton of nitrogen that will go right into your land. So I think those two sources are excellent.
I think that it's amazing what will happen if you just add urine to a lot of your systems. If you're missing fertility, then of course you grow all of this. And if you want, like, have this section over here growing some grasses of some kind, and then you put all the urine over there and those grasses just go crazy and they're huge and they're doing so good. And then you can take those grasses and use those as your mulches, use it as your hay, make your own hay. So, all right, Samantha,
you can make a lot of hay for yourself. You can make a lot of hay for yourself just by allowing a portion of your lawn to grow and without mowing it and give it a lot of nutrient, and the grass will really take off, and then you can just cut it down and use it as your mulch.
When you watch Helen Attow's Garden Master Course, and hopefully somebody will put a link into the chatty chat there, she shows that the system that she does now is she does these like, looks like an 8-foot wide swath, which is where she grows her current market garden. And then there'll be 16 feet of grass and whatever weeds are growing. And then each year she'll move 8 feet over. So the old plot will now get covered in weeds and grasses. But what she'll do is that when the grass gets to be like 1.5 feet tall, she mows it all down to the ground. And then she takes all that stuff she just mowed, and that is her hay mulch. And it's like, that is just brilliant. And so on top of that, there's that whole movement of food, not lawns. And I want to say that I wish they would change it to more food than lawns, maybe, because I think lawns have a place. It's a great place for there to be a picnic table for the kids to play or for people to do their yard sales. There's just tons of stuff where a yard is great. And but on top of all of that, you could let it get a little bit long and then cut it. And now that's your hay mulch to put on something. So, all right.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, Samantha, do you have anything else to say about Back to Eden?
Oh, Back to Eden. I think if you can find a good clean
Uh-oh. I think your internet crapped out. I
The
can't hear you.
mulch. Can I hear
We
us
missed
now?
some of what you said. There was something that went
If
silent.
you can find a good clean source of chips, and I know that is a hard thing in a lot of situations, but if you have a good source of chips and you know they're clean, I think that the mycelium grows extremely well underneath the wood chips. I think I would see mycelium grow and begin right away. It seems like when you lay those wood chips down, certainly faster than I would see it growing underneath a hay mulch, or even a leaf mulch. It seems like if you lay down wood chips and then you just dig into it for whatever reason, you see that white mycelium going all over. So I think in a situation where you want that and you need to hold that nutrient, I think that's an option. I don't think it's going to give you, it's not going to give you the same results as doing a mulch or doing a hay, but I think it's something to play with if you know that you have clean materials. I think you might be able to get something similar by going out in the forest and getting, rotting logs or, a woody debris that comes off of the hedge or something. I think you could get a lot of that without having to chip the wood. You don't have to have it be small. It could be just old rotten stuff.
I would much rather take branches or logs or twigs or whatever and not chip them and just lay them down as a mulch. I do think that a good thing is you take some nice pruners out there. Oh, come on! What are you doing? I've got my pruners here, but somehow they've like hooked onto a thing. Like, what are you? Like the little carrier has got like a little something. There we go. Pruners, yes. So go out and take the pruners and knock it up into pieces that are like a foot long. So if you got a big long branch and loppers, bigger, like pruners on steroids, pruners with 2 foot long handles, knock those pieces up. That was kind of weird. That's kind of too bad. First time that ever happened. Then it lays flat on the ground. Because you got this big branch that's like 15 feet long or something, and you go to lay it down, and it's all wow, and it's like not exactly helping out with the mulchy mulch, and it's like, oh, I want it to touch the ground. But I'm going to say, I'm gonna make a general statement, and I'm gonna say, until you get to be like a level 7 or 8 gardener, never use wood chips. In fact, I'm going to go and say it a little bit differently. Anytime you're tempted to use wood chips, you're doing it wrong. And that's just because I've seen way too many people use the words that you just used.
The mycelium?
No, wood chips. Like, let's say you have a good, clean source of wood chips.
Oh, okay. Well,
and it's like that part where, let's say, that's where it all
you don't
falls
really
apart.
know. Yeah.
It's like, oh man, that's such a failure point.
Do you think you'd get the same result if you were to take branches and like just make a really nice layer of branches and then cover that maybe with dirt or something so that you can get that experience of the soil? And I don't know if it's the wood that's making the mycelium.
I don't like what you're proposing.
Okay.
I don't like the idea of putting the dirt on top of it. Here's so if you're thinking wood chips, and it's like, so A, don't bring them in, and B, don't run a wood chipper.
Well, I'm just noticing the mycelium growth, and so I'm wondering how else would we get that?
Ooh, oh, good. That's exactly where I was going next.
Okay.
How else do you get that? And it's like, perfect. Now, you have been to my property many times, including in the summertime, right?
Yes.
And you've been to the dances with Pig's Meadow.
Yes.
You've probably been to the dances with Pig's Meadow when it's all green and covered in flowers.
Uh-huh.
And you've probably also been there like in August when it's all brown.
Brown, yep.
You may have even been here in like October when it's kind of like brown but speckled with mildew.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Mhm.
What I'm trying to say is you're saying I want a high carbon organic matter that mycelium is going to love.
Mhm.
And I'm saying Dances with
Dead
Pigs
grass.
Meadow.
Okay.
When the stuff is all gross and not even the deer want to eat it,
Yeah.
go and get a truckload of that. In fact, I can tell you that the Boots do it all the time, and you can fill a truck in like under half an hour. Like that truck is now heaping with this stuff. Then when you buzz over to like Allerton Abbey and unheap it onto your gardens, I would have to say that this product is far superior to wood chips.
It's going to be a lot faster.
And no
Yeah.
chipper was used. There's a thing that Stephen likes to call it the golf club cutter, because you kind of swing it like a golf club. It has like it kind of comes down and then it goes over and then it has like a little blade on the end.
Yeah.
That's kind of serrated. And when I watched the movie Cool Hand Luke, they call it a yo-yo. And so I keep trying to say it's a yo-yo because I watched that Cool Hand Luke movie, but he calls it a golf club cutter. And it's like, all right, fine. But they go over with those and they go whackety, whackety, whack. And of course, if you want to get really cool, you can use the scythe. But I think everybody likes the golf club cutter better than the scythe. I think the scythe makes you look cool. And you could probably do more with the scythe. But the golf club cutter, I don't know. It's like it's a stepping stone to the scythe, maybe. People just like them better than the scythe. I don't know why, but fine. That's cool.
The scythe is more fun if everything is standing up nicely and there's no sticks in the grass. I think if
That's
it's
true.
a mashed down old dead grass and there's sticks, it would be nicer with your golf club.
Plus, the scythe is a kind of a piece of art, beautiful thing.
It's a special thing. You're not screwing around with it with sticks.
If you hit a rock or a stick or something like that, you're like, oh no, I'm ruining the art. But if you're in there with that $7 yo-yo, you're like, yeah, well, I got another one in the truck. If I break this one, I don't care. So
I think you also release a lot more anger with the yo-yo than with the scythe, so it's kind of a release of sorts.
With the scythe, you kind of have this feeling of responsibility, but with the yo-yo, no, you're just going to get the job done. And so, yeah, I think that's probably part of it. But the key is you were saying, what if we had this magical unicorn wood chips that we could get? And I think I came up with something far better than your best wood chips.
I think it depends a lot on where you are and what you have. This guy in the peninsula, there's a lot of logging. I bet wood chips are as easy to get as anything, but you have meadows full of grass. So for you, making wood chips would be ridiculous. But for him, maybe it makes sense.
Well, I do have a sawmill, and we get a lot of sawdust at that sawmill. And we do use it sometimes for mulch. But these are our trees where now that we've been here more than 11 years, and also when I bought the property because one of the deal breakers for me, this property was covered in weeds. Clearly, nobody has ever used any weed killer here.
Yeah.
And so, and the funny thing is that a friend of mine walked the property with me, and he's a forester, and he was saying, like, what are you going to do about all these weeds? Oh, there's so many. You even got this one. And I believe my response to him at that moment was, because he was pointing to a patch of knapweed. What are you going to do about this knapweed patch right here? And I said, wherever I have a knapweed patch, that's where I want to plant a permy. Somebody sets up shop there, they start building a little something, they start growing a little garden, they're going to rip out all that knapweed right away. But
yeah, knapweed's not so bad, I don't think. The butterflies like it. When I had my geese here, they enjoyed it. And it's really no problem.
The first month we were here, I think we brought in 3 different like 5-gallon bucketfuls of different knapweed predators, like things that thought knapweed's yummy and only knapweed is yummy. But you'll also notice that, and I know that, Samantha, you've claimed a little patch of hugelkultur near the house as your garden. How much knapweed have you ever seen on that?
None.
And
There's
that's
no
'cause
knapweed.
I think
But if there
everything-
was, I wouldn't mind, because I just pull it up and use it as mulch. I mean, I don't think the knapweed is a problem. If you have too much of something, you can just over harvest it and use it. And I know, I think was it in the sauna, you were using it as you're using knapweed as straw to make your straw walls. It's a great plant. I mean, I don't feel like a plant is really a problem. If you have too much of a plant, you just over harvest it and it's not a problem anymore.
Instead of wood chips.
Oh yeah. Well,
anytime you got wood chips, I think you should at least entertain the thought that you're doing it wrong. Like, I cannot think of a scenario with wood chips where it's good. You know, at least, I mean, if you get up to like level 7, level 8, then yeah, you can find where there's a bunch of wood chips somewhere because they took a load of logs and you saw where the logs came from and you saw it was infested with weeds and they took it to a mill and the mill has this mountain of wood chips. Sure. Now we're deep into, we're talking about level 7 gardening though. And that means we're down to like, I don't know, is level 7 like 10,000 people out of the whole world? And it's like, I think most of the people watching this video are going to be a strong level 3, which is going to be like what, 1 million people in the world. And so I'm going to say, like, don't, generally the general feeling, the general thought, what I want to push onto people is like, if you should at least have the thought that if you're using wood chips in any form, you're doing it wrong. Just have the thought.
I think that anything, I mean, I would certainly pick dead grass or knapweed or any kind of lighter weight vegetation over something heavy like a stick or a wood, because the mouths of the creatures that are eating that are very small. They're going to have the ability to chew into a piece of dead grass much more easily than a piece of wood. So in terms of getting that carbon into your soil and incorporating it into the earth so you can grow your plants, that's way faster if it's a piece of straw or a piece of dead grass than if it's a piece of woody material. So it's definitely a higher choice, I think. And you can see when, like, if you have a pile of grass, like, rotting straw, you can see the root itself going into there and getting that, growing right into that piece of straw. And to me, that's what it's all about, is that line between the plant and the material it's taking it from. Because that's where your soil is it's like being created right there.
Or the mycelium, you see the fruiting body of the mushroom. And if you go digging around in there, you see all these mycelium networks and roots and things. So it's like, clearly the mycelium are far happier with this gross straw than with wood chips.
Yeah, especially if you're just getting started, you're going to see the benefit a lot quicker with the smaller material, with the straw.
One other problem I've seen with the people trying to do Back to Eden, they'll get cedar wood chips. They'll get like those cedar shavings that they use for kind of like mulching around things and stuff. And they'll get tons of this stuff that's cedar. And how does cedar do with your gardens?
Cedar does not help things grow. It likes to make things not grow. That's why people use cedar to line their, make their raised beds or to make their deck, because it doesn't rot very well. You can find cedar trees in the forest that have been there for probably hundreds of years, dead on the ground, just lying there. They don't rot hardly at all. which is
And
cool
cedar
in their
trees will
own
grow
way.
out of them, but like nothing else will. You can walk through those forests of cedars and there's nothing else there. But apparently, cedar has 4 different kinds of natural herbicides in all cedar duff, which I think is rather fascinating.
That's
Okay,
really cool. Yeah.
let's change gears a little bit. I got another topic to bring up. And building rich soil when mulch is not available. So before I do this, maybe each of you could take a stab at it. So Samantha, go ahead and take a try. You're going to build rich soil. You got dirt, and you don't have any mulch. You have dirt.
So one thing that I think is pretty fun is like if it's a lawn or if it's just land that's kind of growing whatever.
Let's say it's just dirt. Let's say there's no lawn.
Dirt.
Just
so
dirt.
You can actually take clods of that dirt and build yourself mulch out of the dirt. Like if you take yourself a pitchfork and you grab clumps and then you lay those out in a long, in a heap, maybe throw some other stuff in there, whatever you have really, by creating the shelter on top of the surface, you're creating that mulch environment. You don't have all the wonderful nutrients that you get in your hay or your straw, but you have created the shelter so the worm can come up and he can do his business and he can be safe and the other little creatures will come in there and it will produce a soft land. And then when you push that away, you can reach your hand right in there. Even if it was so hard you couldn't push through it with a shovel, if you cover it with a layer of clods of earth or dirt, even stones. I mean, you could go down and get big old boulders and lay those on there. And when you pull those away, that land is soft. And you'll find places where the vole came up and made a tunnel and screwed around under there. And the worm came up and pooped. And the land has been protected from the evaporation. So all the water that came down and landed on all those rocks was stored there. And it will produce good soil, even if you don't add anything. You just cover the land.
So I do want to say a weird and funny thing about that. That is an idea that was presented like in 1930, something around in there, as like, hey, if you don't have mulch, you can make your own out of the dirt that's already there. And then we had the Dust Bowl. So yes,
I think it takes
what you're saying is entirely true. What you're saying is true, and it's not a new thing, and it does work. It is effective, and that was why. And so many people loved that idea way back then. That's how we got the Dust Bowl.
I'm not sure that's what caused the Dust Bowl, but it does have, and then where I live, they do something called dust mulch, which is, I think, not beneficial, but it does work. It's can be 6-8 inches or more of just loose dirt, which blows away or washes away. But if it doesn't blow away or wash away, it will insulate the lower soil and it acts like a mulch. And then the next year, they will be able to grow a great crop. Long term, it's not a good idea. And I much prefer the clods or the rocks technique because something that doesn't blow away. Even just laying logs on your soil will cover them and cover the soil and create that environment.
Okay, so the question is building rich soil when mulch is not available. Now I'm going to say the rocks thing works, but the rocks thing I think would count as mulch. And so, because I think rocks make a great mulch, but okay, we're going to, and then on top of that, for the rocks and the dirt clods, we're trying to talk about building rich soil when mulch is not available. Now, I do think that the thing about the clods, like okay, so there's no mulches available, but the thing about the clods, it kind of makes things worse, but it does kind of make things better. And so part of it would be, I think that if you were to, like if you're on flat land, if you were to texture. Now, I do want to say that there's a picture that I use when I do my presentation on replacing irrigation with permaculture. There's a picture of this flat space where apparently they tried to grow cotton for years, and then finally they depleted the soil of organic matter so much that it's just cracked clay. That's all you see is cracked clay. So the part where the clay cracked and grew up, there's a little bit of shade under there, kind of like what you're talking about, but still nothing grew. It was just cracked clay. The story is that the guy came in with a yeoman's plow to do what's the word? Keyline. He's coming in to do the keyline stuff, and so he did that's all he did is he just drove the keyline plow around. So basically, didn't add any mulch, but things changed enough by driving the keyline plow around in the keyline way that now there's a whole bunch of weeds growing there, and that is building soil. So that's big. All right, now I feel like I'm cheating, but Samantha, I want to give you one more try. Building rich soil when mulch is not available. Now let's pretend that it's a home gardener. So they've got a quarter of an acre to work with, but it's a quarter acre of dirt. And so go. I know you can come up with 12 things like in an instant.
Well, one thing that you're doing with that key line is you're allowing water to get into the soil, but you're also kind of claiming a deeper level of soil or deeper level of dirt as your growing surface. So if I have, I've got, 8 inches of what I could think of as topsoil, even though maybe it's not very nice, it's this top soil. And I say that the first 6 inches is my mulch. I can, make a furrow and plant in my furrow. And then the existing surface is my new mulch. And I'm taking water and nutrient from a deeper level. So that's something that you could do. And then the next year you do it again, and it's going to be better every time you do that. And if you can do that without disturbing too much, like I love the key line because whatever little plants are growing there, their root is not disturbed. So I'm digging a nice deep trench through it with my keyline plow, but everything that I didn't disturb isn't bothered. And so I don't lose to wind or to water flowing through. I don't lose even the tiny roots of just a little insignificant plant, it holds that soil together. So I think that that's a way that you could, by basically just calling the top surface mulch and the lower surface your growing surface.
Okay. Clay, you want to take a stab at it? Building rich soil when mulch is not available.
I mean, if I could get any sort of plant established at all, I think that would be my first thing, is that if we're talking about dirt, right, it's lifeless.
Dirt.
And so if there's any hope of maybe a type of grass or whatever weed is in the ditch, as Joel Salatin likes to say, if we can get that started, then maybe that'll bring the life and start kickstarting a transformation of that dirt into soil. And so I think that if I had absolutely no mulch, and I didn't have a keyline plow or couldn't get it on my quarter acre backyard, then I think that I would simply start by planting something.
I would say that's where I would begin as well. And so I would try like a dozen different species of things that will tolerate growing on absolute dirt. And then we're going to be able to water them. So there's going to be some irrigation available. And then on top of that, there's going to be whatever comes out of the kitchen, which Samantha mentioned before. And then there's the whole pea on it thing. But, adding any kind of fertility to this land is going to help it along. But I would say that if it's absolute dirt, the thing I'm probably going to try earliest is going to be anything that is both a nitrogen fixer and has a spiky taproot. And so the spiky taproot will just dig down into that dirt and start, doing the exchange with the animals and whatever else. And so, but let's start the process of building soil, even if it's going to be slow. And so I would say when it comes to those kind of species, in fact, I think lupins.
Lupin is a great one. If you have
Look
water, you'll make a huge change just to water.
And here's some more. I got more than one kind.
That crimson clover?
Lupin, more lupin.
Lupin. Oh, cool.
Lupin. Yeah. So I got 2 different kinds of lupin sitting right here. But lupin is nitrogen fixer, and they have a taproot. I would try different kinds of alfalfa, but alfalfa can be very pH picky. But there are some grasses that will tolerate absolute dirt. But most grasses are kind of like, if you don't have nitrogen, I'm not working here. I might try a tall fescue. So there's a ruminant-friendly endophyte tall fescue. So it has kind of a fungus in the plant that'll help the plant thrive, even if there's not good nutrition in the soil. But anyway, there's lists and lists and lists of things that I think would be really. I mean, I would even try sunchokes, just because they tolerate such terrible soil. I would also try to get some black locust trees started. But okay, so we don't have any mulch, and we're trying to build good soil. I would say I want to start planting things that'll be tough on dirt, and then go out there and I want to pee on them. I want to. Here's some nutrient. Let's get started. Let's get this beginning. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen the pictures of the hugelkulturs that are built here at base camp that first year as they're being built. But
I was here. It was at your place when that was happening. Yeah.
Oh,
it was
cool.
like sand piles and just straight up dirt. You could hardly get it to stay on the hugel until you brought in another round of logs.
Yeah.
And it was just dust a lot of times. But now it's real soil.
We pretty much ignored it for the first 5 years, and then the soil just got better and better and better. And I don't think it was even so much peeing on it, because we hadn't made any paths or trails or ways to get up there. So nobody wanted to go and put that stuff up there. Wasn't even very much kitchen scraps or anything put up there either. There were some spots where we put the kitchen scraps in the later years, but it seems like for a while, all the kitchen scraps are always placed down low where it's easy to get at, and nobody tried to go up high. But just stuff kept growing and stuff kept growing and stuff kept growing. And then the soil got better and better. I don't think that the soil's, and then it was a year ago that we got water. And so we could start to irrigate. And so that helped a lot. But yes, having the access to water makes
all the
difference.
Yeah. A lot of our lands that are dry in summer or cold in winter, they create a lot of organic matter that doesn't have a chance to break down. And so when you do add moisture to those landscapes, you'll find that land is really fertile, even though it didn't appear to be in its natural environment. If you just add water and try growing stuff, a lot of stuff will grow.
I've on the next, so I'm going to set that one aside. The next thing I have is just too perfect. I have to get this in here. When I say deep mulch to people, it's pretty hilarious what they do. And they point at it and say, I did what you said. But what they point at isn't even an inch thick. So when I say deep mulch, I would say that the thinnest deep mulch would be 3 or 4 inches. But really, I'm thinking can we do 8? 8 is good. When you say deep mulch and you're getting into 12-inch territory, I would start to think that might be too much. I mean, granted, if it's a lot of logs, maybe that's all right. But okay, when I say deep mulch to you, Samantha, what do you think that means?
Enough mulch that you've really created a different environment at the surface. So maybe you throw down 12 or 14 inches of hay when it's all fluffy, and then it gets watered on, it gets walked on, and it gets trampled down. But if you haven't changed the environment of the surface, like you just have a little scattering of grass, you really haven't done anything. It's a little better. You're going to hold a little more water, you're going to catch a little more dew, but you haven't done a mulch. And until, I mean, if the grass can grow through it, it's really not a deep mulch. You're just, kind of sheltering the land. But I think you have to really change the environment so that those creatures that live in the soil come up to be on your surface.
Clay, what do you think of when I say deep mulch?
Kind of piggybacking off of Samantha's answer, no light penetration. Like we're creating a space where no grass can grow, no like the sun isn't going to burn all these little worms and bugs and whatnot that come up to the soil surface. And so when I think of deep mulch, really no light should be penetrating that. And it should be, smothering out things that you don't want as you've kind of laid it all down there.
I'm going to say that deep mulch has to be so thick that it would smother everything. So grasses are going to be some of the most persistent. I mean, I would say anything with really incredibly deep taproots, like Canadian thistle or what's that? I can see it in my head, and I'm trying to field bindweed. Those, I think you're probably never going to be able to mulch thick enough to get rid of those. But if it's thick enough that you're going to kill off most species or possibly even all the species right there, and then it's, I don't know, 50% thicker than that, that's deep mulch. But it's like, and I could even say, put the mulch down at least 6 inches thick. I'll say those words, and then they'll ask me to come back and take a look at how great it is. Look, I did what you said. It's, and it's like not even an inch thick. And it's like, are you using a broken metric system or something? So, I don't know. It's one of those weird things where it's like I can't communicate it, or I don't know. Maybe there's something that has to happen to be different so that people can hear 6 inch thick mulch, because I'll talk to. This is like Mel Bartholomew writing his book Square Foot Gardening. He says he wrote this whole book because he got tired of saying the exact same thing over and over and over again and being ignored. At least if it's written down, they can't say, you didn't say that. There it is, written down. I handed it to you. I showed it to you. It's written down. And now they can't say that he didn't say it. So, but this is deep mulch is a big thing. So I just wanted to make a point of saying, like, it is so weird to me how when we talk about mulch, how people can't seem to hear it. And it's not like I'm just talking about boots in the boot camp. I'm talking about, I've been to so many different properties and try to talk about it. And then they're like, look, I'm so proud. Take it. Praise me. And it's like, that's not what I said. In fact, you're just going to feed the grass that's there. You're not even smothering the grass. Anyway, I just feel I feel glad to be able to take this moment to share this wackadoodle thing about deep mulch and the phrase deep mulch.
Well, some folks might be more comfortable putting it down in layers, like put it down a nice, what you think of as a deep mulch, and then water it and watch it for a while, and then put down another layer. and, see how your plants do and just keep adding. If you're, if putting down a whole bunch at once seems like too much or too hard or too weird, just add more after a bit. Because if you put down a really deep mulch of dry material, it can take a while for the land under your mulch to get wet, depending on the time of year. So maybe just watering it in and letting it settle and then adding more to see how that looks.
I like what you're saying. I want to add a weird frosting onto that. And that is that I think that when you get in about the 4th year of doing this, the effort becomes 1/10 of what it was when you were starting. Like on the 4th year, you don't mulch nearly as much. You don't have as many weeds. Most of the weeds that are growing there are volunteer food plants. And so you don't care. It's a bit like how in that first year here, we had knapweed everywhere. And then after about 3 years, we had no knapweed. And then we had, then we kind of went to war on prickly lettuce. And now we rip out prickly lettuce. Now there's hardly ever any prickly lettuce. It gets, so as we're talking about what mulch to lay down and how to build soil and things like that, I think that part of it is that you get to the point where on these beds, they're pumping out a whole bunch of food and you go and you make a whole new bed over there. And now on the first bed, you really don't have much work to do except to harvest. All right, you guys keep going. I'll be right back.
I think that harvesting only is especially true if you've built hugelkultur and you've planted perennials. There are wonderful hugel beds here at Wheaton Labs where you can just go out there in the early spring and it looks like somebody planted the garden, but stuff is coming up much earlier than if you were to plant seeds. And it's all the perennials that are coming out of the land. So we didn't, somebody worked hard at it one year and the stuff just keeps proliferating. There's lovage out there that's bigger every single year. It's kind of like celery when you eat it, but it's a perennial and there's no work involved. You just walk out there and pick it. There's walking onions that are growing. A lot of the stuff will reseed itself too, like the kale and the peas. They just roll on down the hill, the little seeds, and grow again. Another fun one is the living mulch from the pennycress. It's a plant that you can eat. It's a kind of a spicy herb, and you can eat that in the spring. And then as the summer rolls on, the pennycress stops growing and it goes dormant and is just a dead looking weed. But that's acting as a mulch on the landscape. So the water will be retained in the soil because that plant is there. And if you want, you can pick it and lay it down as a mulch in a different place to smother something. And then those seeds will come up and grow you more pennycress next year. So I think if you want to work less, then perennials are going to be the best thing. And the perennials are able to go deeper because they live year after year. And so they're getting minerals that are deeper in the soil than your annual garden. So I think those are two great ways to not have to do so much work. You're back in our gardens. I was just saying, like, you have garden beds out there in your hugelkultur that are covered in perennials. And so even if nobody went to garden, there's food there, and there's food sooner in the springtime than there would be if you were to plant seeds. There's lovage and stuff coming up way before the kale or any of those little cool spring plants get sprouted. They sprout on their own, of course, because the seeds are in the ground, but the perennials will be ready sooner. I think that's fun.
The last point I want to talk about is the glorious diversity of deep mulch. And then I got plus the correct way to chop and drop. So first, let's talk about the glorious diversity of deep mulch. So I kind of feel like one of the things that I do is I go back to the drain field where there's like all the hay you want growing right there on the drain field. And I go back there with a sickle and I take those firewood carriers out and I load up the firewood carriers So now I've got these two giant bundles of basically freshly cut hay. And then I can come back and I can lay that down as a thick mulch, like a good 6 to 10 inches thick. And it's going to definitely smother whatever's underneath it. And then on another spot, like we just cut down a tree somewhere, and now we've got like this pickup truck load of branches. And it's like, okay, so now I'm going to go lay these branches in a bunch of different places. And then there's the chop and drop. Maybe there was cutting down some knapweed or some of the prickly lettuce or something that I don't want. And that'll be in another spot. The key is what I'm trying to get to here is to say, I love the idea of having like 20 different kinds of mulches, and it's not spread out evenly. It's all blotchy. It's all in different spots, different mulches in different spots. Oh, the Ruth Stout composting that we do. So you take a bunch of kitchen scraps and you go splart, and then you throw a bunch of sawdust over it. There, that's a mulchy spot. It's going to smother whatever's under it. And it's like, great. So I want to go with diversity. And the last thing I want to touch on is the correct way to chop and drop. And this is another thing where I've been to I don't know how many places. It happens here, but in many places too. It's not just limited to here. And you try to explain this to people, and they just can't do it. And this is and the way that I generally describe it is like let's say you're going to try to smother grass, and you're going to try to use grass to smother grass. So you're going to go and you're going to have these 3 units of grass, and you're going to cut all 3. You're going to make a wad, and you're going to cover the first unit of grass. You're not going to cover the second 2 units of grass. And those are just going to grow back up. But the first unit of grass is going to end up being smothered. So this is what I describe. And then what they always do is they cut 3 units of grass, and then they spread it out over the 3 units of space. And what does that do? It feeds the grass on all 3 units. Whereas what I was proposing was they would smother 1 unit and not feed the other 2 units. And so for me, this is the correct way to chop and drop. You got to get enough stuff that you're chopping to be able to drop it in such a way that it'll smother the stuff that you don't want. But it takes a lot.
You'll need more land surface of mulch gathering area than the amount of area that you're going to mulch. So you'll need to go further afield than your actual garden bed to go get material to bring in. If you're going to mulch it enough, because there isn't enough growing right there to fully mulch that garden just by chopping it down. You'll need to go outside the garden. Or to maybe do a small bit of garden at a time. But yeah, one patch of land is not going to grow enough vegetation to fully smother that patch of land.
All right. You got anything, Clay?
No, I definitely echo Samantha on that. I've done some chop and drop, but yeah, you need more than just what you're mulching. Other than that, I think I'm good.
So this whole thing started off with how we can replace a soil test, or what the answer to a soil test almost universally is. And so I can say I've done a lot of soil tests, lab test soil tests, and you get back the NPK. I don't even like to think about NPK anymore. I mean, sometimes I need to. Sometimes it's like, for example, with my friend's trees, pretty obvious it's suffering from a lack of nitrogen. So I want to bring in something that's going to be nitrogen heavy. Now, granted, the hay tea that came through when it rained wasn't exactly just pure nitrogen. It was, a bunch of different nitrogen heavy compounds, and which is what this tree was super tasted up for. So I think it's good to have some knowledge of NPK, but I just hate the idea of gardening that way. And so the whole thing about like the universal answer is to just improve the quality of the soil and add mulch. That's and that'll solve almost anything that you're going to try to do with a soil test. In fact, you'll get the soil test and then you'll add all of that same mulch. So why even bother with the soil test? So clearly there's a time when the soil test might be very, very necessary. But I think for most of the time, without the soil test, the answer is almost universally the same. And there could be some weird exceptions where you're going to get some soil tests done in order to be able to figure some stuff out and understand it. So I feel like we're done with this topic. We're all good. We covered a lot of extra stuff that I felt was really good. And you guys got anything else you want to add to this one? I see Samantha trying to talk, but I don't hear any sound. I see your lips moving.
Hey, I'm sorry. I muted myself again. Tim made a comment about the height of the hugel beds and the seed distribution and things rolling down the hugel. And one thing I've played with is when I'm doing a chop and drop, if it's something I pull out by the roots, then that's fine. I just throw the root up, like when I lay it on the hill, like leave the root clod and I put that in the uphill so the plant itself is facing downhill. Or if I'm cutting it, I'll put the heavy end, the ground end up the hill and lay it down so that, because a lot of times it will come down the hill, but if you lay it vertically and then you have the heavier part uphill, that seems to really help.
I think the last Permaculture Smackdown we did was hugelkultur, and I think we went into a lot of detail about how to keep the mulch up on the sides of a very steep hugelkultur. So that might be worth checking out.
We're also going to have a bit of a collection of things, a permaculture heap of things for hugel beds coming out in a few days. So if folks want to learn more about hugelkultur and kind of get a lot of hugelkultur knowledge all together, you might keep your eye out for that. It should be a really good deal.
Liv asked if she could make a bundle.
And she wanted to call it a heap because it's for hugelkultur.
Yeah, and so that's neat. And I've been observing what she's putting together. It is going to be a lot of stuff, and so that'll be cool. All right, if you like this sort of thing, come on out to the forums at permies.com where we talk about soil tests, homesteading, and permaculture all the time.
All the time.